Good morning. It's Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. We're here for the regular board meeting. We got a full slate of commissioners. We got the administrator and the clerk of the board. So at this point in time, I'll call the meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first thing, order on the business is approval of warrants. I believe we have one.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $444,666.36 as presented, to note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda today.
Move for approval of consent agenda as presented, 5 items.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 5 items on the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we have a certificate of appreciation for Mark Miller, who is present, and I thank you for coming. On behalf of Franklin County, I'd like to express our gratitude for your faithful service as the lead inspector for the Franklin County Noxious Weed Board from January 4th, 2016 through February 24th of 2022. Your contributions to the county and your years of service have been invaluable. Please accept this certificate of appreciation for your dedication and professionalism. We hope you just know how much we respect you and have valued you as a colleague. You will be missed at Franklin County. So, Mark, I thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, sir.
And good luck in the future.
Thank you.
Any other words from the commissioners?
I would like to say I've enjoyed this time. It's been a good ride. When I got notice from Karen about this, it was a neat surprise. So I thank you for this, and it's been a great ride. Like I said, the weed board folks were a great bunch of people to work with. I'm going to miss it. They told me to keep coming back, so I may be around. But thank you again, gentlemen.
All right, thank
Welcome
you.
back anytime. Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, it's not on the agenda. Are we doing Piper's certificate of appreciation today? That's next week. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the commissioner administrator updates. Keith?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Had a busy week as usual. It was productive, I believe. Had quite a few things. Participated in the WASAC call yesterday. We had a representative from NACO talk a lot about the infrastructure bill and what's going on with federal legislation. Last week, you will recall, I had a request from a citizen that was having some challenges with a building permit. I met with that individual and his planner, as well as our planning and building department director, and got those issues ironed out. I think we're on the right track there, got them situated with what they need. I think we're in good shape there. I met with representatives from HAPO Credit Union regarding the ATM project that's going to be starting out at the HAPO site. That was an agreement we reached some time ago, but because of COVID, they decided to wait on the installation of that, but that project will be starting here in the next few months. Had a meeting on hosted by TRIDEC regarding the effort to protect the Snake River dams. It's going to be a very concerted effort beginning to counter some of the rhetoric that's been said about the dams, and working with our regional partners in other states as well to try to make sure that those dams are supported and recognize how important they are to our agriculture and commercial community here in the area. Another meeting on shoreline reconveyance with the Umatilla tribe, still working on some draft language for an MOU and for the legislation that will be forthcoming. That meeting went well. We have some challenges with our One Solution product when it comes to HR and payroll that we're evaluating. So I'm working with folks in the auditor's office to kind of strategize a strategic plan forward for how we deal with that to make sure that our financial systems are in good working order. Participated, of course, in the Bi-County meeting with you all and the Board of Commissioners from Benton County last week. And then also had a meeting sponsored by TRIDEC where we were able to meet with the Undersecretary of the Department of Energy who came out to the site to visit the Hanford site and just talked about the kind of strategic future of Department of Energy's plans for that location. I think that's a brief update of what meetings I've been to.
Thank you, Keith. Commissioner Peck?
Let's see, had the same bi-county meeting that the three of you had with Benton County last week. Had a Hanford Area Economic Financial Trust Board meeting on a loan for a local business. Had the Washington State Association of Counties meeting yesterday, which was the hour-long midday update. Awful lot happening there. I'll come back to that in a minute. Had the Washington State Association of Counties Legislative Steering Committee meeting, which was 2.5 hours last Friday, going through a lot of the pending legislation in Olympia, and especially focused on those that impact counties, obviously. Washington County's risk pool, which I'm the county representative last Thursday, was an hour-long introduction for new risk pool members. Council of Governments, Benton Franklin Council of Governments meeting with the Executive Committee looking at an adjustment for a loan application for a local business. And then numerous conversations with folks over in Olympia, especially with the WASAC staff. On Saturday, if you hadn't heard, Representative Fye, the chair of the Transportation Committee, proposed that in lieu of the 6-cent interstate gas tax or petroleum tax, which I think they've realized that the Federal Commerce Clause doesn't allow them to enforce, decided to replace that lost revenue with by pulling the $100 million per year that was dedicated for the Public Works account, which, if you're not familiar, is what provides funding, grants, loan backups, bond backups for a lot of the infrastructure that counties do, everything from water to sewer to culverts and support for roads, and just a major hit. They had previously swept this money, the legislature, and had promised that this would end in 2023 next year. But to make up for this 6/10, they've now proposed extending that $100 million a year shift an additional 15 years. We're working with Rep. Fye and the committee right now, myself, WASAC, and my co-chair for the Legislative Steering Committee, to try and see if we can get plus-ups in some of the other accounts, the County Road Administration Board or Transportation Improvement Board, TIB. And we don't know yet what that looks like. But I'll just point out that we're at a time where the state has got record revenues. They've got federal money flowing in at rates I haven't seen in my 14 years of doing this. And yet they still think that in addition to not providing any funds for county roads, preservation and maintenance, they're also wanting to take this $100 million a year from the Public Works account. And so WASAC is looking closely at, or at least considering changing our position and having all 39 counties collectively and publicly oppose the transportation bill. This bill could very well get passed today, so if that gives you a sense of the urgency. Normally I don't take that much time on one issue, but this one directly affects Franklin County and all 39 counties. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So I also attended the bi-county meeting with all commissioners present. Also had a meeting with Visit Tri-Cities and Board of Health meeting. And it looks like Inslee's lifting the mask mandate on after March 11th, but still no word on when they're going to federally lift the mask mandate for public transportation. And then also met with citizens about our mental health situation we have going on. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Mullen. And I too, special board meeting with Benton County, special Board of Health meeting that we had. We have concerns there. On that, what you mentioned, that he has moved the mask mandate up to March 11th, actually it should have been lifted immediately because the math teacher from Richland has discovered the flaw in their math in Olympia. And that is, they were using a 7-day total instead of the 7-day average that the CDC proposed. And therefore, we've already met their metrics of 5 per 100,000. So there's no need for these kids in school who are having an undue amount of stress put on them. We've had 6 suicides over in Richland. These masks need to be taken, this needs to be taken effect immediately, and I would suggest that Inslee swallow his pride and admit their math mistake and lift the mask mandate for the schools. Also, the Port of Pasco. You talk about a 2-hour meeting. I had a 5-hour meeting with the Port of Pasco. They tend to enjoy their meetings. And it was from 10:30 till 3:30. Of course, I'm on the phone. I'm attending with the option of remote, and that's what I did. But yeah. The meetings are pretty lengthy, but they did cover a lot of business. And Keith, you referred to that gentleman. I don't know if they told you, but they've been in this process for 2 years and $30,000 to try to get that permit to build that house. Did they share that with you?
Yeah, they've shared everything with me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you meeting with them, because disgruntled bosses isn't what I like to hear from, and they are our bosses. We work for the people of the county. So with that, we'll move down to the Bi-County Advisory Committee on Behavioral Health Needs. I believe we have a resolution here that has been put forth. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, we do have a resolution here. This attempts to put into effect what we agreed to with Benton County last week. I think it's consistent with the direction that was given by both boards, and in order for us to kind of take that next step of placing people on the committee, this is a formal recognition of that.
I've read through it. I don't see anything wrong with it. Does the other commissioners have any problems with the resolution the way it's written?
And it looks exactly like what we discussed last week, so
Yep.
I'm good with that.
I'm okay with the draft. I would just note that there probably wasn't quite as much attention given to distinctions and overlaps between substance use disorders and mental health. They're often co-occurring disorders, and I think we all know that well. But the language suggests that you can't have a chemical dependency absent a mental health condition, and I don't think that's strictly correct, but it's not a big enough issue to keep me from supporting the resolution, especially given that I think we all understand that they can be co-occurring, they can be independent. Either case, we need to address them.
Do I Have a motion?
Move for approval of Resolution 2022-043 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion for approval of 2022-043 and a second. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we have public comment. Is there anybody on the phone, Keith, or anybody in the audience for public comment?
No one on the phone yet.
George Dockstetter, Self Landing Road. I attempted to attend the meeting between you and the Benton County Commissioners, but had to leave. And the one thing that struck me on this, and hopefully it is just an advisory committee and not an executive committee, because I didn't see anybody from the public on there. It was all, or excuse me, from the private life. Everything was public officials or doctors that all have their own pet projects and no input from the community members on what they'd like to see. Hopefully, the executive committee of this bi-county behavioral health or whatever we're going to call it in the end, is composed of public citizens serving on the board, because all I see coming out of this thing right now is a bunch of wish lists, and the money's not going to be enough to satisfy every public official on their pet program on what they're going to want to see. And it's going to be a lot of scratch my back for my program, and I'll scratch your back, and the next thing you know, we're $2 million in the hole. So hopefully the executive committee is made up of citizens from both counties and not public officials. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just for the benefit of the audience, I'd note that it's not an executive committee, it's an advisory board. It is advisory only, and in our bi-county meeting, 5 positions were added for citizens.
Did you want to address that, Keith?
I think Commissioner Peck answered it. We do have
Well, and
significant representation from the general public on the committee.
And the other thing is, we have citizens that are representing the emergency responders, and I've already had people coming to me that want to be on this board, and they are citizens, but they give their services. So I think we're going to pretty much have a lot of people that are going to be citizens that are serving in other roles too, as far as the 5 citizens from the public.
Correct.
Okay, is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone? All right, seeing no more public comment, we'll move down to administration office business.
That's all I have this morning, Commissioners.
Okay, next we have public comment. So this is your last chance. Anybody for public comment? What a quick meeting.
I have something I would like to ask. I mean, with everything that's going on with Greater Columbia Behavioral Health and Lords, I would like to ask that Commissioner Peck ask for an external investigation into GCBH and the termination of Lords contract. So I don't know if we need to make a motion or just discussion on that, but
Well, I'd point out that it might be a lot more appropriate to have us put you on the agenda for the next GCBH meeting, and you can make that appeal directly to the entire body, not just having one member of the body do that.
I assumed because you were our representative of that board. When is the next meeting?
So we've got one later this week on Thursday, and be more than happy to contact the staff and let them know that you have an interest. I'm, as you can imagine, well acquainted with the action that the board took, and I'm certainly not aware of any activity by the board or board members that, in my mind, would warrant or necessitate an investigation. But if you feel there is, please come to the meeting, make that request.
And where is the meeting held at, Commissioner Peck?
I participate remotely, but the GCBH offices are in Kennewick on,
I know where the address is.
I'm drawing a blank on the street. It's on Edison, just north
Edison.
of, or just south of Canal.
Are they having in-person meetings? Or is it done all remotely?
My participation has been remote, and to my knowledge, everyone else's has been as well. But again, I would recommend that you contact staff directly and ask if there's an opportunity to meet in person. If not, it would be remote like the rest of us are doing. Keep in mind, this is a board of 9, representing 9 counties and a tribe, so we're spread all over South Central and Southeast Washington, so the travel for people is extensive too. That probably contributes to the desire for online meetings. But I'm have no concern or quarrel if you want to make that request. If I were to make the request, the question would be, what's the concern? And I don't see one, I don't have one, so it would be asking for an investigation without a cause.
One other question, how long has Greater Columbia Behavioral Health been in existence? This happened way before I was here, so.
Yeah, Commissioner Cook served on it before I did. It certainly predates my time as a commissioner, which goes back 14 years now, so I couldn't give you a date off the top of my head.
When it was formed, wasn't it up to each individual county, whether we joined Greater Columbia Behavioral Health or we put it underneath the health department?
Well, it's a fair question, and if I had known that you had these questions coming in, I'd have done the research and had the answers for you. But again, I wasn't here when it was formed, so I don't know or don't recall what the criteria were for people to join or not join. But again, if you think that the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health function and our role in it needs some adjustment, by all means, happy to have that conversation.
I just wasn't unaware, I wasn't aware if we were obligated to be a part of Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, or if we still have that option to put it underneath the health department or mental health services.
Yeah, well, fair question. Not one I've heard before. Happy to explore it with you. No issue. You are, I'm certain, aware that there are several different behavioral health entities like this one across the state. We're not the only one.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I have a question along these lines too. The motion to terminate on convenience is what alarms me, where there doesn't have to be an explanation of what was done wrong. And for Lords to be singled out and terminated for convenience, I have a problem with. And I want answers to. Because this is our local hospital, and this is quite about amount of funds that they're going to be lacking in. And looking through the history, they haven't had a problem until the matrix was changed in 1 month, and then they terminated them. This bothers me, and I want to do some research and ask some questions, so I too may be attending that meeting on Thursday. So with that, is there anybody else for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I've got some comments on the previous subject. Actually, that's not technically correct. I have a request, and as if you gentlemen want to launch into investigations of other bodies, if you want to have detailed discussions, it would be far more appropriate to put that on the agenda so that the people in the audience coming to attend, members of staff, can come in and have better, more complete answers for you. So,
Well, it doesn't have to be on the agenda, Commissioner Pack.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman.
It does not have to be on the agenda. I've done my research on this. Now, please, if you're going to question that, look it up for yourself, because
Well, actually,
anything can be brought up in the meeting.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, since you brought it up,
I didn't bring it up, Commissioner Mullen did.
No, you just brought up the question of the agenda and whether or not it can be on there. You said we can add anything we want. Under Robert's rules, the agenda is only drafted by staff and the chair, and there is a requirement under Robert's rules that the body vote on the agenda at the start of the meeting and approve it before proceeding, or in some cases amend it. So that's how the process works. That's not a process that you have followed, but I'll leave it there. I have done my research as usual. Thank you.
Do you have a comment, Keith?
Just, I got a text here from Kyle Sullivan. He said he would be willing to call in if you have questions about, or want some more insight into some of these questions you're answering. So should I ask him to do so?
Call into the meeting on Thursday?
No, into this meeting today, this board meeting.
Well, Kyle
It's
did
not a-
not have any input on the decision made. It was the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, and so he is, he's just somebody on the outside. We want answers as to why the termination for convenience. He won't have those answers because he wasn't part of the voting members.
Okay.
Okay, with that, if there's no other business for the good of the county,
And you're more about public comment, I got something I
Yep.
want to say.
we have still got public comment going on.
You know, I don't know a lot about behavioral science except what my wife calls me. And that pretty much covers a lot of it. But it looks to me, one of the questions that ought to be asked, we got the Greater Columbia Basin, which is 9 counties. Are we funding them? Or are they being funded by the state?
By the state.
By the state? Then, and we're gonna go, supposedly, go to the old Kennewick General and start our own, behavioral community deal by county. Why are the hell we with the Greater Columbia Basin? Why aren't we Benton Franklin County and get the money from the state to go with the money we're putting up as individuals? So anyway, just a thought.
Well, Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of the public again, I'll speak to that. The Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Organization is actually a limited liability company. It's formed under state direction and guidance under the State Healthcare Authority. It's funded with state health dollars. The local effort at KGH is a local 2-county only, not 9 counties, and it is funded, it is intended to be funded with the .01 mental health and substance use disorder tax that was just approved by this board and by Benton County. So the authorities are different, the funding mechanisms are different. What is not different is the population intended to be served. So that's the answer as to why the two are not combined.
If I might add to that, when we talk about state tax dollars, might I remind everyone where those state tax dollars come from? We the people. It's our money.
Good morning, gentlemen. Could somebody, perhaps Keith, I'm not sure, I follow this pretty closely, but could you kind of give a difference, as Commissioner Peck said, we have the same audience being served, but we have two kind of different directions. Could you kind of explain how that would lay together and how those two would benefit, or, you know, being as we've got the same audience, how does that work? Can you do that? Thanks.
Good luck.
I'll defer a little bit to some other experts. However, GCBH has a slightly different mission than what we intend with this committee that we've just organized or are in the process of organizing. We have a specific need for mental health and substance use disorder crisis services in both Benton and Franklin County. And that's really the purpose of this additional sales tax, to fund those services that currently lack in the community. Greater Columbia Behavioral Health has a broader mission across those 9 counties that make up GCBH. And frankly, I don't get that involved in the details of either organization, GCBH particularly. I'm aware of their meetings, but I don't regularly participate in their agendas, so I'm not an expert on what they do.
If we're able to get the old Kennewick General Hospital operating and moving, will any of those services, will GCBH provide any of those services through that facility, or will that give us the ability to provide services for ourselves, Benton Franklin County, that GCBH currently, the services they provide?
Yeah.
So Keith, let me speak to that if you don't mind, since I'm on the GCBH board. GCBH has more of a, I shouldn't say more, but it is more mental health crisis treatment oriented than I think KGH is going to be. I think KGH will be crisis as well, but also wraparound ongoing services. Hasn't been created yet, so I can't say that's a fact. I'm just saying that's my impression of the intent. And GCBH, as an independent limited liability company under the state's authority, can contract with a number of entities to provide crisis and mental health services using those state dollars. So the underlying question is, could they, in theory at least, contract with the operation at KGH? And I believe the answer is yes. The question remains, once it is actually created, what kind of a legal structure or entity it has, who is actually operating it. There are some mechanisms in there where there might be a conflict with contracting with a state, but I think it's far more likely that the KGH operation could in fact be the recipient of contract dollars from GCBH, which are state dollars, which of course are taxpayer dollars. I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Okay.
That does provide a little clarity. So I don't know. This is I don't know. But is there such a thing as Benton Franklin at some point in the future with this facility operating? Is there the possibility? I don't know what the pros or cons. I don't know. But the possibility of us pulling out of GCBH, as far as we're one of 9 counties right now, is that a possibility of us pulling out of GCBH as them being provider representing us, and then we provide those services through that facility?
To give you a precise answer, I'd probably have to do some research, but my initial impression is that if we were to pull out of GCBH, the funds would not follow us, and therefore we could leave, but all we'd be doing is removing ourselves from the benefit of state funds for additional mental health treatment.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we could ramp up to having the qualifications with that facility to provide them somewhat in-house, so to speak, versus having an outside source do it, where that we have a facility that we potentially could work into the accreditation so that we could provide those and receive the state funds. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud.
Well, I have long been an advocate of spending $0.01 in the private sector with mental health providers in the private sector for a variety of reasons. It gives us diversity of treatment options. Some of them can be residential treatment where a person is there in the facility for an extended time. Others can be outpatient. And I think the more you support the private sector in providing these kinds of services, the stronger that sector gets in your community. And it's always nice to have depth and breadth in those kind of services.
Yeah, thank you for those answers.
So let me reiterate. The community has a vision of having a one-stop location for our behavioral health needs in the Bi-County region. Over the past 36 months, to include GCHB and other people, that vision has been talked about in depth. And in that, there's discussions of how do the private entities that are around the table, where do they fit into that concept and that overall goal? And again,
GCHB was there. All these different acronyms were there when we were discussing these things in the discussion. And at the end of the day, the community wants to pick who their service provider is going to be it Yakima Comprehensive or R&I or some of the other service provider platforms that you can envision. And that work has been done to a certain degree. The community envisions a KGH type of model where you have social detox, you have secure bed space, unsecure bed space, and you have the staff to handle those crises when the cops and the firemen drop people off. And they have this vision that all of these organizations are going to wrap around that concept and be a part of the solution, not a cog in the wheel. And we're to a point where we need to be open-minded about those things and let the community decide what they want. I heard a few questions here. Yes, you, Mr. Commissioner, can vote to go it alone and not ask for the state's help. And then once you've created that help, you could come back around and ask for those state tax dollars to come to what you've created, not what 9 counties have created or anything else. You can go back after that tax dollar and remove it down the road if you choose to do so. This is an exercise about listening to what the community wants so that we can better serve our community members, so we can remove people in crisis off the streets and give them a place where we can try to restore them. And let's not lose sight of that vision, because there's a lot of people out there that's the vision. Not what GCHB's vision is or this commissioner's vision is. It's what the community wants, and it's been a long time coming. And you start cutting out your local providers such as Lord's and Cadillac and all that without them having a play and a say, then all you're doing by doing that is trying to stand alone is you're just hampering the community's vision, and you're actually probably removing necessary services from people in crisis when they need that done, and then you're packing your jails full of those people versus getting them the help they need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody know what the background is on the reason for the GCBH 9-county model? My assumption would be that it's the economy of scale, that you pool those resources and are better able to provide a cohesive model. That's my assumption, but does anybody know what that is? Back when it was formed, my assumption is all of us had much less need for these services, and now that it's getting big, it's less personal, but I don't know.
Those are generally created by the state. They're not necessarily just the 9 counties getting together to say we want to form this organization, but the state is divided up into these service organizations that are that way. So whether we could withdraw, that remains a question, I guess, that we could.
Yeah, I'm not advocating
own,
for withdrawal.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand it, as Sheriff pointed out, that it's important for the community to be involved, and trying to learn and understand more is simply what I'm trying to do at this point.
It was my understanding it was created, we were given the choice by the state to either form this join this 9-county group, or we could put it underneath the health department and basically put our own director in under the health department to see these funds from the state for the mental health. That's my understanding. And again, this was done way before I was in office, so I'm kind of like the rest of us, learn as we go.
It's been through a couple of iterations and changes since I've been here, but it predates my experience in Franklin County.
So I'm going to change the topic a little bit, Commissioners, although ditto to Sheriff Raymond on everything that he had to bring in his comments. I want to bring to the attention of the Commissioners House Bill 1782. I think that this is a critical bill. Currently, it's in the in committee right now at the House Rules Committee. This House bill is intended for the purpose of creating additional middle housing and near transit and areas traditionally dedicated to single-family detached housing. It can have devastating effects to this state and the taxpayers of this state. I personally am opposed to it. I've publicly and published that I'm opposed to it. The King County assessor has actually put out some information that under this, the way that it is worded, it could take single-family residential properties, reclassify it to where you could put in sixplexes or whatever where that current single-family residence is, and it would require the taxation, whether it's a single-family resident or not, to be moved up to the same as the highest and best use, which would be the sixplex. So it could take a $600,000 property, move it to a $2 million property fairly fast and instantly. And under state law, we're required to assess values based on 100% of highest and best use. And this would change some of those properties in the highest and best use categories improperly. So if you were to take that and apply that to residences even in this county, even though we're not as big as King County by any means, we definitely have transit areas, we have single-family residence areas. I truly believe that one political aspect or side of the thing is trying to reclassify an awful lot of single-family residences and get rid of them and get them into multifamily. So I would encourage the commissioners to look into this. Don't take what I'm saying as gospel, and the public, look into House Bill 1782, review it, research it, and if you feel the same as I do, oppose it drastically, because it will have devastating effects on much of our residential single-family areas in the county and other counties. So I'm personally on record as opposing it.
So just one question. So that would change if you owned a single-family residence and your neighbor put a sixplex on his, tore his house down. Would your house be taxed as the potential of putting a
They wouldn't
unit?
even have to have a sixplex next to you. It just has to have the ability, even though it's all single-family residences in that whole area, if the land could have been zoned and or could have had a sixplex put on it, this would change it to where the highest and best use of that property would be a sixplex or a fourplex or whatever it would be if the lot was large enough, the parcel was big enough and so forth, and therefore under current state law would require the assessor's office to assess it at highest and best use, which would be equivalent as though there was a sixplex on that ground. Not the structure, but the ground and so forth. So in the comparison that the King County assessor put together, sent out to some of us, that comparison within 4 to 5 years from this date would change a $600,000 property to a $2 million property.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Tax value.
Assessed values, which would
Assessed
be
value,
taxed
taxed,
on that. And you can
yes.
imagine, I mean, yes, if there's enough of them, it's going to lower your levy rates, but that's not the point. It still could have devastating effects. So look into it, research it for yourselves. I've publicly come out opposed to it, as most of the assessors that I know have, but I think it's worth bringing to your attention.
So does it affect open spaces also?
No, it does not affect open space. Just the certain areas that would be classified in that transit or single-family sections, within, a metro area.
It'll devastate the family dwelling.
It could
in town.
hurt. It could definitely hurt single-family residences. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Are there assessors that support it?
I do not know of any that are supporting it personally. That doesn't mean there's not some. As the association as a whole, we haven't put anything out in writing. I'm on the executive committee and I'm also the chairman of the Southeastern Washington 10 counties. We haven't put anything out in writing as a group yet, but I do know that certain people that are trying to at least get word to legislatures are opposed to it under the current status. So,
Yeah, there is actually at least a potential impact on open space. I believe that part of the legislative intent here is to increase population densities in urbanized areas so as to reduce the expansion of urban growth areas. And under the Growth Management Act, that's one of the key objectives. So you can imagine that if your infill in a county donut hole goes from, let's just use round numbers to make it easy, 100 single-family residences or 600 multiplex family residences, now they've accomplished a higher rate of infill in the urbanized areas, which, as the legislators I'm acquainted with, would tell you that then suppresses, at least in theory, the need to expand your urban growth area out into farm ground.
correct.
So if you increase the density in the urban area and you constrain the urban growth area, you protect farm ground, and that has a connection to open space.
Correct.
I'm not advocating for the bill. I'm just articulating the chain of events that are associated with increasing urban densities. And the driver, I believe, really is the Growth Management Act in constraining the urban growth area.
Yeah, and in a roundabout way, it would have another effect on open space if somebody was to come out of open space.
Oh, yeah.
And the land is certainly market value much higher, but not the open space assessed taxation value. They'd be paying back 7 years plus the current year plus interest on that could be at a much higher rate, which would have an impact as well.
There you go.
Yeah.
As usual, legislation has many unforeseen consequences.
Correct. That's why I wanted to bring this to your attention. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone, Keith?
No.
With that, if there's no more business for the good of the county, this meeting is adjourned.